Russia would have never gone in if the election weren't rigged. It was a rigged election. The 2020 election was rigged, and we got out of it. And you see what happened. You see what happened to our country. Inflation, Afghanistan, that horrible withdrawal from Afghanistan. I think when Russia saw what happened in Afghanistan, they said, wow, it's a paper tiger. We're not a paper tiger. We are the strongest military force in the world. And by the way, Pete Hegseth is doing a great job. But we didn't have wars. We didn't have inflation. We had a strong border. We had everything going good. And then Biden got in, and he's, my opinion, the worst president in the history of our country. I think Jimmy Carter was a very happy man when he passed away 2 weeks ago.
What are you expecting at the cabinet meeting tomorrow?
It's going to be a cabinet meeting, and I'll preside. Unlike Biden, I'll preside over my own cabinet meeting.
Mr. President, how do you compare your cabinet in your second term to your cabinet that you had in your first term?
Well, I had some great people my second term. I think this is deeper. I think it's better because it's deeper. I had some people that I didn't really like too much in my cabinet, but I didn't know Washington then. I was a New York person. I knew New York intimately, but I had to rely on people. I had great people. Look, we got the biggest tax cuts in history. I rebuilt the military. I mean, we did so much. We did unbelievable. Even right to try. Somebody was saying today they were saved by right to try. We did right to try medically. We did transparency medically. That was a big thing, but Biden canceled that one. He didn't cancel right to try, which is interesting. He didn't cancel Space Force. He was going to cancel Space Force. Space Force is turning out to be invaluable. Amazing. We created Space Force. But think of it. We rebuilt our entire military, and now we're going to have to patch it up a little bit again because of what's happened. No, this was a grossly incompetent administration. The only thing they were good at was cheating in elections and the weaponization of government. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. We're having some very good news today. A lot of companies are coming into our country, and they're signing deals that are going to pay a lot of money and create a lot of jobs. And they're coming in largely because they think they feel good about our country, and maybe the tariffs to a certain extent, but they feel very good about the country right now, and so do I. And great things are happening. We're going to be signing some executive orders and some other things, and we'll maybe go down the list. And Will, if you would, please.
First, we have an executive order for your attention. In 2019, during your previous administration, you imposed price transparency requirements on the healthcare industry. This was a significant driver in lowering the costs of healthcare during your first administration. Those requirements were largely reversed by the Biden administration. Now we're reinstating
or terminated, right?
Terminated. We're strengthening them. The idea is to make price transparency a key aspect of healthcare policy in America.
It's one of the biggest things that can happen to reducing cost in healthcare. It takes a little while to kick in, but Biden ended it immediately upon coming in, which was a terrible travesty, in my opinion, and we're going to start it up, and we've actually made it even stronger.
Yes, sir.
By a couple of major factors, right? Anybody have any question on price transparency? It allows people to go out and negotiate and price, and you're not allowed to even talk about it when you go into a hospital or see a doctor, and this allows you to go out and talk about it, and it's actually one of the biggest. There's a couple of people that actually going back a long way that feel that are real pros in the industry feel this is the biggest thing you can do for cutting prices, and it certainly is one of them. And it's been unpopular in some circles because people make less money, but it's great for the patient. It's great for the people in our country. Okay, it's not so good for pharmaceuticals. It's not so good for the companies that make the drugs. And I guess you could say it probably isn't so great for hospitals, but they say that if you have a great hospital that's really knows what they're doing, it's actually great for a hospital because everybody wants to go there. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Good. Got it, Doug?
Thank you, sir.
Pulitzer Prize. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have for your attention another executive order Copper is a critical material, and the supply of copper is vital to our national security. In recent years, we've dealt with a significant issue of the dumping of foreign copper into the American market. That significantly impacted the domestic production and manufacture of copper and copper materials. This executive order charges your Secretary of Commerce with starting the process to potentially impose tariffs or other trade barriers to prevent this ongoing dumping of copper and to protect the American manufacture and production of copper.
It will have a big impact. Howard, you want to say something about that?
Do you mind if I read one of your truths?
Sure.
So this is a truth that's about to go out. Like our steel and aluminum industries, our great American copper industry has been decimated by global actors attacking our domestic production. To build back our copper industry, I've requested my Secretary of Commerce and USTR to study copper imports and end unfair trade putting Americans out of work. Tariffs will help rebuild back our American copper industry and strengthen our national defense. American industries depend on copper, and they should be made in America. No exemptions, no exceptions. America first creates American jobs and protects our national security. It's time for copper to come home. And if it's all right with you, if I can talk a little bit about the digital services tax, would that be all right?
Go ahead, do that.
So I read another truth. This is sort of so fun to read his words. It can't be any better. So our incredible United States economy and undeniable American spirit has enabled the creation of the greatest technology companies on earth. Our digital economy is bigger than most of the world's countries, and the market cap of even one of our companies exceeds every European country. Instead of empowering their workers and creating opportunities, foreign governments have instead tried to tax, fine, and hinder Americans' technology companies. Both friend and foe have been treating American tech companies harshly, as if our companies are their piggy bank. This will now end. It is my objective to level the playing field and end these attacks. We are putting these countries on notice to end their unfair treatment of American companies, large and small. Our companies are the greatest investors in the world. So our tech companies are the greatest investors in the world, and their investments will go only to where American companies are treated fairly. Our ingenuity, grit, drive, and perseverance have built America. If these countries want to participate in the AI industrial revolution, it's time to choose sides with America, not against us. And we signed that on Friday, sir.
Okay, very big deal, right?
Huge.
Thank you. All right, and that's a very big one that Howard just read, but they're both big. They're all big. We're only doing big ones. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, is that the culmination of ongoing conversations that you've had with your counterparts, this particular executive order?
Which one, last or?
The one that the
No,
Congress Secretary
the digital tax is taking place all over Europe. They're taxing us, and they're doing other things. They're suing all our companies. And if that's going to happen, we want to be the ones that sue, not them. And they use it almost as a form of running European countries, and the EU in particular has been very violent in its lawsuits against our companies, and frankly, very violent and very bad to our airlines. I've gotten calls from the heads of airlines saying they stop in Europe and they're getting charged all sorts of taxes that they never even heard of. They stop and they're getting fined and charged, and they do it only with American companies. They're not doing it to other countries, so we're stopping it. And we have another thing, we have another step to go, and if they don't shape up, as an example, Apple has had to pay like $17 billion in a lawsuit that nobody thought was worth anything. And I won't get into the judge or the decision or how the decision was arrived, but I'm pretty good at this stuff, and I think it's disgraceful. And Google's being sued, Facebook's being sued, and many others are being sued by their so-called government, if you call it a government, EU. And They don't treat us right. They don't treat us right as a country. So we're going to protect our companies. We have to protect our companies. So we're not going to have any companies left anymore. I also want to thank Apple, though, for announcing they're going to invest $500 billion in our country. That's the biggest investment anybody's probably made to this date. And they're going to do it very quickly, and that's because of tariffs. They don't want to pay the tariffs, and they feel very strongly about the country. Now, they wouldn't have done it without us. Without the Trump administration, they wouldn't have done it. But they feel very strongly about the direction of the country. The polls have shown that, too. The polls are coming out showing direction of the company is the best, of the country is the best they've ever seen, actually. Best they've ever seen. So I just want to thank Tim Cook and Apple for the confidence. $500 billion. That's the biggest investment anyone has made in a short period of time.
Mr. President, have you spoken today with the House Republican holdouts who
Yeah.
said they would not be supporting the budget resolution?
Well, I'm not involved in that. They know what I want, and the Senate knows what I want, too. And the Senate's got a bill that's very strong, having to do with the taxes, because the taxes is what's bringing all these companies in. So, and without it, by the way, you'd have to double your own taxes. Everybody would be doubled up, and you'd have the biggest tax increase ever. So the House has a bill and the Senate has a bill, and I'm looking at them both, and I'll make decisions. But I don't know where they are in the vote. I know the Senate's doing very well, and the House is doing very well, but each one of them has things that I like. So we'll see if we can come together.
Mr. President, can you clarify, hopefully once and for all, what your expectations are with this email to federal employees? What are you going to use that information for? And do you see it as voluntary, like OPM has said, or mandatory?
Yeah, well, it's somewhat voluntary, but it's also if you don't answer, I guess you get fired. What it really
I'm
is,
still lost on that.
What it is do people exist? We have this massive government with millions of people, and nobody knows who's working for the government, who's not. So what they're doing is they're sending out a letter to everybody, and they're saying, what were the things you did last week? Mm-hmm. I guess they ask for 5. And if people are working, it's easy. I could tell you 5 things I did last week. I could tell you 5 things I did 6 weeks ago, right? If they're there and they're working, they're able to say they did 5 things during work. And that means they're working and they're with us and they have no further obligation. If they're not, it could be there's no such person. It could be that the person's no longer working. They're no longer living at that address. They may be moved. Maybe they moved to a different country, or maybe the person doesn't exist. And we then take that person off the payroll, and we save a lot of money by doing that. But that's one of the only ways. I think it's a very smart thing. And it says, if you don't answer, essentially, there's a penalty to pay. Like, that's the end of the job.
Well, Musk has said that. The order itself doesn't say that. I think that's part of the confusion. Is he speaking for you when he says you'll be terminated?
Yeah, everybody speaks for me. I'm the one. I'll take responsibility. The old statement, the buck stops here, right? Famous statement. Well, I can say the same thing. The buck stops here. No, we have to find out if people are getting paid and they're not working. And, they have a problem. Let's say they have another job. And then they write in false statements. It's a big problem if they write in false statements. They may be working for somebody else but getting paid by the U.S. government. And that would mean that they're not allowed to be doing that. They're not allowed to be working for us and be working for somebody else. We're paying them a lot of money. We're paying them. So we'll see. That solves that problem. Most people aren't willing to say that, we're doing this, and this, and this for the U.S. government, and yet they're at another job, because that's a big problem for them if they do that. So in some cases, they're not writing back. And if they don't write back, they end up eventually losing their job. We give them extensions, but, that was something we thought about a long time ago. We give them extensions, but we'll see. We have to make sure, number one, that we have people, number two, that they're working, and number two, they're working for us, not for another company.
Is it true that President Zelensky is coming on Friday to meet with you, and is the mineral deal sorted out?
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that he's coming on Friday. Certainly, it's okay with me if he'd like to, and he would like to sign it together with me, and I understand that's a big deal, very big deal. And I think the American people, even if you look at polling, they're very happy because, Biden was throwing money around like it's cotton candy. And it's a very big deal. Look, it could be $1 trillion deal. It could be whatever, but it's rare earths and other things. And look, we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on Ukraine and Russia fighting a war that should have never, ever happened. That's a war that would have never happened if I were president. And it didn't happen for 4 years. People say, how do we know that it didn't happen for 4 years? Would have never happened. And nevertheless, this guy went into this situation and he spent money like nobody's ever seen, $350 billion. The other thing that we don't like is that Europe has spent $100 billion. We've spent $350 billion. Europe gets their money back because they spent it in the form of a loan, and we just gave them, whether it's 300 or 350 billion, nobody really knows. They can't even tell me the answer to that. It means probably more than that. So what we're doing is now we're saying, look, we want to be secured. We want to get that money back. We're helping a country through a very, very big problem, a problem like very few people have had. Shouldn't have had this problem because it shouldn't have happened, but it did happen, so we have to straighten it out. But the American taxpayer now is going to get their money back plus.
Mr. President, yesterday with Emmanuel Macron, you said you had spoken to Putin about the idea of peacekeepers in Ukraine, that Putin was fine with it. The Kremlin, I guess, has said that that's actually unacceptable to them. What's real here?
That's not what I was told. But you're going to need some form of peacekeeping, so something will be done that's going to be satisfactory to everybody. We need peacekeeping too.
Any situation where there's American troops involved?
It's actually something I did discuss, but a form of peacekeeping that's acceptable to everybody. Ultimately, we'll be able to agree on something, I'm sure.
With Ukraine and this mineral deal, what does Ukraine get in return, Mr. President?
$350 billion and lots of equipment, and military equipment, and the right to fight on, and originally the right to fight. Look, Ukraine, I will say they're very brave and they're good soldiers, but without the United States and its money and its military equipment, this war would have been over in a very short period of time. In fact, I was the one that gave the javelins. You remember the famous javelins? That was me. That wasn't Obama. It wasn't Biden. It wasn't anybody else. It was me. And they wiped out a lot of tanks with those javelins. And the expression was that Obama gave sheets and I gave the javelins. That was a big deal at the time. It wiped out. That was the beginning when people said, wow, that's something. Well, that was American equipment. Without American equipment, this war would have been over very quickly. And American money, too. I mean, a lot of money.
So
Mr. President,
that war-fighting equipment and the ammunition, that's sustained going forward for Ukraine, and how long is it sustained?
Well, it could go forward for a while, and maybe until we have a deal with Russia. Look, we need to have a deal with Russia, otherwise it's going to continue. But now when Americans put up their money, the taxpayer money, and the president approves it, we're getting our money back in some form. But it could go on for a while, or it could be settled quickly. I think it's going to be settled quickly. I spoke with President Putin. I think he wants to settle it, and wants to get on with life. It's horrible. What's happening, horrible. Thousands of soldiers a week are being killed, and others too, but especially on the battlefield. Thousands a week are being killed, and we want that to end.
Mr. President, when you spoke to
Brian?
Yes. Okay. Real quickly, Carolyn Levitt, your press secretary, sent an earthquake through that briefing room earlier today announcing that the WHCA would not have any control over placing media in the seats of the briefing room. Just want to get your thoughts on that. And also on Air Force One. It's trending on X. People are talking about it. Get your thoughts.
Well, we're going to be now calling those shots. As you know, we won that lawsuit right there. See, the Gulf of America, which is a beautiful name. Most people agree. I don't know. It's, AP has been terrible. Look, I think they're radical left. I think they're third-rate reporters. I know the specific young lady that works on the account is terrible. She's a radical left lunatic, as far as I'm concerned. They don't treat us fairly. That's number one. And number two, they had no right to do that. This is the Gulf of America. And if you look at that shoreline, look at that shoreline. Look, from Florida, well, most of it it's called America. And vast majority, like big numbers. So I'm just admiring it as I look at it. I'm getting teary-eyed, but I don't want you to say Trump broke down and started crying. No, how beautiful is that? Look at the shoreline. Look at that.
Well,
That's
can I-
America.
Can I shift our attention to Canada real quick?
Yes, please.
Last week, I spent some time with two government officials for Canada. I was asking them how realistic is it that Canada would be the 51st state?
Yeah.
And they told me there is a path. Alberta is first, and if they sign on, Saskatchewan would follow, and then you go west to British Columbia. There is a movement in Canada to join us. I want to get your thoughts on that and how that's proceeding right now.
So it's true. Thank you, Brian. It's true. A lot of people in Canada are liking becoming our beautiful, cherished 51st state. They'll have to pay much lower taxes. They'll have the ultimate security. You know, they don't pay very much for security right now because they rely on us, which is really unfair to us. They make cars that we could make, and they send them back into the United States. They make a lot of things, including the sending of oil and everything. We don't need their oil. We don't need their lumber. In fact, we're going to be freeing up, and I've asked Howard Lutnick to get that done with Lee and everybody, Lee Zeldin, environmental. We're freeing up our forests. We're going to be able to take down trees. Right now, you know, we're so restricted environmentally. We're going to be freeing it up with an emergency order. We have an emergency order, and we're going to be freeing up our forests. We have more forests than almost anybody, and great lumber, great trees. We don't need anybody's trees. We don't need trees from Canada or anybody else. In fact, we have to put the slits, as they call them, the area, you know, 50, 60-yard area in between areas of trees. It stops the fires. And frankly, California should have been doing that for years. It's almost getting late. They're going to run out of forests the way they're going. What a shame. And by the way, the water is flowing in California. I hope you people have seen it. But the water is flowing. Do you have a picture of that? I'd hold it up. Do you have a picture of that? Get a picture of it, please. You know, we had a little skirmish in California. I can't believe we had to do that. But we opened up the water in California. The water was flowing into a place called the Pacific Ocean, which for the Pacific Ocean is only a drop. But for us, it's more water than we can use in California. So I'll get you some photographs, but it's a beautiful sight. The water is flowing in California. Beautiful water from the Pacific Northwest and beyond. And it flows down, and instead of being routed out to the Pacific Ocean, and this has been going on for 20 years more in order to take care of a certain species of fish, which wasn't doing very well without water, I can tell you. So that's a big deal. It's like not reported. It's incredible. But California has a lot of water. That's going to take care of farmers. It's going to wetten up the land. And it's going to go all the way down to Los Angeles, where they have curfews on water, where they have all sorts of blocks on water. You can only use so much. We're going to put until just recently, they were going to put a number of gallons per person living in a house in Beverly Hills on water. You're not going to have that problem anymore. Do you have a picture? Let me just see what that looks like. How beautiful is that? Look at that beautiful water flowing. Look at that. That's coming in the dikes and other means of transportation. Isn't that beautiful? Who would believe that? That's all water they could have had. I went to the governor during my first term and I said, why don't you do this? And they said they have an environmental problem with clean water. If this water were there, you wouldn't have had those fires. You had sprinklers. They make people put sprinklers in the ceiling of a home, and they had no water in them. With this, they would have had a lot of water in them. They would have all been full. That would have had you would have had a whole different deal down there. You probably wouldn't have had a fire, but if it was, it would have been small, would have been put out. You had the fire hydrants not working in California. So it's a beautiful site. These are canals that were built. These were all built. And you saw them for years. They were empty, concrete.